Before we begin, welcome to Epic Impact, a channel where ordinary moments turn into unforgettable stories and small silences speak louder than words. If you believe that the quietest decisions can change entire families, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay with us, because today's story might feel closer to home than you expect. The day she stopped answering the family group chat. Nobody noticed at first. The messages kept flowing like they always did. Good morning, flowers. Forwarded jokes that had been recycled 100 times. Blurry photos of dinners. Reminders about birthdays. Complaints about traffic. Debates about politics that never changed anyone's mind. The little notification bubble kept lighting up her phone, again and again. As if nothing in the world had shifted, but something had. Her name was still there at the top of the chat. Just below the group title her eldest son had chosen years ago, Family Forever. Her profile picture was the same soft smile she had taken at a cousin's wedding. Her hair neatly brushed, her lipstick a careful shade of rose. To everyone else, she looked present. She just wasn't responding anymore. For nearly 8 years, she had been the most active member in that chat. She was the first to say good morning and the last to say good night. She sent voice notes reminding her children to take their medicine, to drive safely, to eat on time. She forwarded prayers before exams, recipes before holidays, and photos of old albums whenever someone mentioned the past. She reacted with heart emojis to promotions, clapping hands to small achievements, and long paragraphs whenever there was a misunderstanding between siblings. She believed that love was maintenance, that families didn't stay together automatically. They required reminders, gentle nudges, daily proof. And so she showed up. Every single day, until she did. It started on a Tuesday morning. At 6:12 a.m., the chat lit up with a sunrise photo from her younger daughter. At 6:15, her eldest son shared a meme about aging parents forgetting how to use technology. At 6:19, her husband typed good morning, followed by a thumbs up emoji. Normally, by 6:05, she would have already sent a message. Good morning, my world. May today be kind to you. Sometimes she added a small flower emoji. Sometimes a bread heart. That morning, the space beneath her husband's message remained empty. No one mentioned it. People are busy. That's what they tell themselves. Maybe she overslept. Maybe her phone battery died. Maybe she was cooking. At 9:40 a.m., her eldest daughter sent a message asking if anyone had the recipe for the lentil soup their mother used to make when they were sick. There was a pause. Usually, she would have replied within seconds, typing out the ingredients from memory, adding small notes like don't forget to fry the cumin first, or add extra garlic if the throat is sore. Instead, the siblings searched through old messages. They scrolled back months, maybe years, until they found it. Someone copied and pasted her old message. No one asked her directly. By afternoon, the group chat had moved on to a discussion about an upcoming wedding, dresses, travel plans, costs, arguments over who would bring what. Her phone buzzed in the kitchen where she stood, hands submerged in soapy water. She looked at the screen lighting up again and again. She wiped her hands on a towel, picked up the phone, and read every message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then she locked the screen. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was something quieter. A tiredness that had been collecting for years. Like dust in the corners of a room no one checks. She still cooked for them when they visited. She still folded her husband's shirts with the same careful precision. She still remembered birthdays without needing reminders. She just stopped typing. By evening, her youngest son sent a photo of his new office desk. Finally got the promotion, he wrote. The chat exploded with congratulations. She stared at the photo longer than anyone else. She zoomed in on the small details: the framed certificate, the plant on the corner, the coffee mug she had given him years ago. Pride swelled in her chest, so full it almost hurt. She wanted to write, I always knew you could do this. She didn't, single quotes T. Instead, she placed the phone face down on the table and whispered the words to an empty room. The next day, she didn't say good morning either. By the third day, her husband noticed. "You're quiet in the group," he said casually over breakfast. Not looking up from his newspaper. "I'm reading," she replied. "That's good," he nodded. "You don't have to respond to everything." She almost laughed at that. For years, she had responded to everything because she believed she had to. Because when the siblings fought, she was the bridge. When one child felt left out, she filled the silence. When someone forgot to congratulate another, she made up for it with double enthusiasm. She had been the emotional translator of the family, and translators rarely get thanked. They just keep conversations flowing. That week, the messages continued as usual. Photos, plans, small disagreements. On Friday night, her eldest daughter wrote, "Mom, what time are we coming over on Sunday?" There was a flicker of expectation in the chat. A few seconds passed. Then a minute, her husband replied instead. "Same as always. Lunch at 1. The conversation moved forward. She was still included, still expected, just no longer heard from. But silence has weight. And weight, over time, shifts things. 2 weeks later, her younger daughter sent a long voice note about feeling overwhelmed at work. She spoke about deadlines, unfair treatment, exhaustion. At the end, her voice cracked slightly as she said, "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." In the past, her mother would have responded with an even longer voice note. Gentle but firm. Stories about her own struggles when the children were young. Reminders that strength isn't loud. That quitting and resting are different things. This time, there was nothing from her. The siblings responded with practical advice. Talk to HR, maybe look for another job. You're overthinking. No one offered the kind of comfort she used to give. Hours later, the younger daughter typed, "Mom." The single word sat in the chat like a spotlight. Her phone buzzed where it rested beside her on the couch. She was watching television, though she couldn't have said what was on. She picked up the phone. Saw her name. Saw the question. She felt something tighten in her chest. She could answer. It would take seconds. A few sentences. Maybe a heart emoji. Instead, she set the phone down again. Not out of cruelty. Not to punish. But because she wanted to know what would happen if she wasn't the automatic answer. Her daughter sent another message. "Are you okay?" Before she could decide, her husband typed, "She's fine. Just resting." The chat shifted again. That night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and wondered when she had become a background presence in her own family. Always there. Always reliable. Always available. Like electricity. Not noticed unless it goes out. Her silence was not a test. It was an experiment she hadn't meant to conduct. The third week brought a small crisis. The siblings argued about money for their father's medical checkup. One felt he was contributing more. Another accused him of exaggerating expenses. Old resentments resurfaced. Who paid for whose education? Who borrowed and never returned? Who moved away and escaped responsibility? The chat became sharp. Words clipped. Sarcasm slipped through. Normally, this was her moment. She would step in gently. Remind them that they were on the same side. Reframe accusations into misunderstandings. She would send a message like, "We raised you to love each other, not compete." This time, the arguments spiraled longer than usual. Her husband tried to calm them, but his words were brief, practical. "We'll figure it out. Stop fighting." It wasn't enough. The fight lasted 2 days. On the second night, her eldest son typed, "Mom, say something." The phone felt heavy in her hand. She read every message again, slowly. She saw how each child was trying to protect themselves, how fear of being taken advantage of disguised itself as anger, how pride blocked apology. She knew exactly what to write, but she didn't. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood there in the dim light, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. She wasn't teaching them a lesson. At least, that's what she told herself. She was simply tired of being the referee in a game she didn't create. Eventually, the siblings resolved the argument themselves. Not elegantly, not completely. But they reached a compromise. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was theirs. Something shifted after that. The group chat became slightly quieter. Not in volume, but in tone. Messages were shorter, emojis fewer. And her absence became a presence. One Sunday at lunch, the entire family gathered around the table as they had for decades. Plates clinked. Laughter rose and fell. Stories overlapped. Her youngest son looked at her across the table. "Mom, why don't you talk in the group anymore?" The question was light, curious. Everyone paused. She smiled. "I'm listening. That's it," her daughter asked. She shrugged gently. Sometimes listening is enough. They seemed to accept that. But later, when the dishes were washed and the house had grown quiet again, her husband approached her. "You've changed," he said. "Have I?" "You don't jump in like you used to." She dried her hands slowly. "Maybe I don't need to." He looked at her as if seeing her from a new angle. "Are you upset with them?" "No," she said honestly. "I'm just less available." It wasn't resentment. It was reclamation. For years, her identity had been intertwined with responsiveness. With being the fastest reply, the softest landing, the bridge over every emotional gap. When did she last sit with her own feelings before tending to everyone else's? The silence in the group chat created space. And in that space, she started noticing things about herself she had ignored. She began reading in the mornings instead of crafting inspirational messages. She took longer walks. She called an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. She started a small notebook where she wrote thoughts that were not meant to be forwarded or reacted to. Her world, once filtered through a screen, widened. Meanwhile, the family adjusted. The younger daughter stopped sending voice notes and started calling her directly instead. The eldest son began checking in privately. "How are you, really?" The siblings argued less publicly, resolving more through individual conversations. The group chat remained active, but its center had shifted. One evening, nearly 2 months after her silence began, her youngest son sent a simple message. "Mom, I miss your good morning texts." It was followed by a small, almost shy smile emoji. Her heart tightened. She stared at the message for a long time. She realized then that her silence had not erased her importance. It had revealed it. She picked up the phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. "Good morning, my world. May today be kind to you." It was evening. The message didn't match the time. But within seconds, the chat exploded with hearts. With laughing emojis. With "We missed this." She didn't continue the streak the next day. Or the day after. She wasn't returning to who she had been. She was choosing when to speak. Weeks turned into months. Her presence in the chat became intentional instead of automatic. She responded when she had something to say, not because she felt obligated. She sent photos of her garden, not just forwarded messages. She asked questions about their lives without immediately solving their problems. And something unexpected happened. The family began to mirror her. They listened more. They reacted less. They checked in with each other beyond the public thread. The day she stopped answering the family group chat had not broken anything. It had exposed how much emotional labor she had been carrying alone. One night, as she scrolled through old messages from years ago, she saw thousands of her own words. Advice, encouragement, apologies on behalf of others. Reminders to be kind. She realized she had been the glue holding tiny cracks together. But glue dries. It hardens. It can only stretch so far. Families, she understood now, should not rely on one person to absorb every fracture. Her silence had forced everyone to strengthen their own connections. On the anniversary of the day she first didn't reply, she didn't mark it. There was no ceremony. No announcement. But she woke up early, as she always had. She looked at her phone. The group chat had a few unread messages. A photo of her granddaughter's drawing. A joke about aging knees. A reminder about an upcoming birthday. She smiled. She typed, slowly, deliberately, "I'm proud of all of you." No context. No explanation. Just that. And this time, she meant it differently. Not because they achieved something extraordinary, but because they had learned, quietly, to hold each other without leaning entirely on her. The day she stopped answering the family group chat was not the day she withdrew her love. It was the day she stopped translating it into constant availability. It was the day she trusted that her children were grown enough to carry their own conversations, their own conflicts, their own comfort. And in the silence she created, she found something she hadn't realized she'd been missing: herself. In the months that followed, the group chat developed a new rhythm. It was subtle at first. The way her eldest daughter began asking her siblings for recipes instead of defaulting to "Mom will know." The way her youngest son started sending voice notes not just when he needed advice, but when he wanted to share something small, like the way the rain sounded against his office window, or how he finally fixed the leaky sink in his apartment. The conversations became less about updates and more about connection. She noticed it quietly, like someone watching a garden grow after stepping back from constant pruning. Before, she had been the sun and the water, always pouring herself into every dry patch. Now, she was simply part of the soil, present, steady, not overextending. One afternoon, her younger daughter called her directly. "Mom," she said, her voice softer than usual, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you hurt when you stopped talking in the group?" The question was careful, as if stepping on fragile ground. She sat down by the window, watching dust float in a beam of light. "No," she said after a moment. "Not hurt." "Then why?" She thought about the simplest way to explain something that had taken years to feel. "Have you ever carried grocery bags for too long?" she asked gently. "At first they're light. Then they start cutting into your fingers. But you keep walking because you're almost home. And when you finally put them down, you realize how heavy they were." There was silence on the other end. "I didn't know they were heavy," her daughter whispered. "I didn't either," she admitted. It wasn't blame. It wasn't accusation. It was discovery. Her daughter's voice cracked slightly. We always thought you liked being the one who fixed everything." She smiled softly. "I do. But liking something doesn't mean you should do it alone forever." After that conversation, something changed again. The next time the siblings argued in the group chat, this time about holiday plans, it didn't escalate the way it used to. When voices started sharpening, her eldest son typed, "Let's not turn this into a fight." Her younger daughter added, "We can compromise." No one wrote, "Mom, say something." She read the exchange with a quiet pride she didn't try to suppress. At Sunday lunch, she noticed her husband watching her more closely than usual. "You look lighter," he said, as they cleared the table. "Do I?" "Yes." He paused. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying in that little screen." She laughed softly. "Neither did I." He reached for her hand, something he hadn't done spontaneously in years. "I should have helped more." "You did in your way," she said. "But emotional noise isn't always loud. It's constant. That's what makes it tiring." He nodded slowly, as if learning a language he had never studied. The group chat, once a place where she felt responsible for maintaining harmony, became something else entirely. It became a window she could open and close. And with that control came clarity. She began noticing how often people typed without thinking, how quickly misunderstandings formed from tone that didn't exist. How many small conflicts could have been avoided if someone paused before pressing send. She started practicing that pause in her own life beyond the chat. When her husband forgot to pick up something from the store, she didn't immediately remind him of the dozen times it had happened before. She breathed. She waited. She let it be a small mistake instead of a symbol of something larger. When her daughter arrived late to lunch, she didn't greet her with a lecture disguised as concern. She hugged her and asked if the traffic had been terrible. It wasn't that she had never been patient before. It was that she no longer felt stretched thin. One evening, her granddaughter sat beside her on the couch, playing with her phone. "Grandma," the little girl asked, "why don't you send stickers like everyone else?" She chuckled. "I didn't know I was supposed to." "You should. It's fun." The child showed her how to search for animated hearts and dancing cats. They spent 20 minutes sending each other silly images back and forth. Later that night, in the family group chat, a small dancing cat appeared. There was a moment of confusion. Then laughter. "Mom," her eldest son typed. She replied with another sticker. It wasn't the same as before. She wasn't reclaiming her old role. She was participating in a way that felt playful, not obligatory. And that difference mattered. But not everything was smooth. One night, months into her new quiet, the younger daughter sent a message that felt heavier than the others. "I think I'm thinking about moving abroad," she wrote. The chat reacted instantly. Questions, concerns, logistics. Her husband typed, "That's far." Her eldest son wrote, "Is this about your job again?" The younger daughter replied, "It's about everything." The conversation began to tilt toward tension. She felt the old instinct rise in her, the urge to step in, to soften edges, to remind everyone that growth often requires distance. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could feel the familiar pull. Fix this. Translate this. Protect everyone from misunderstanding. She closed her eyes. This time, she didn't stay silent out of exhaustion. She paused out of intention. She typed slowly, "If this is something you want, we will learn how to support you." Distance doesn't erase love. It wasn't long. It wasn't a lecture. But it was clear. The chat stilled for a moment. Then her eldest son replied, "She's right." Her husband added, "We'll visit." The younger daughter sent a single heart emoji. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized something profound. Her silence had taught her that her words mattered more when they weren't constant. When she spoke less, she was heard more. The following week, her eldest son visited alone. He sat at the kitchen table, fidgeting with a spoon. "Mom," he began, "can I ask you something honest?" "Always." "Did you ever feel unappreciated?" The word hung between them like fragile glass. She considered lying, protecting him from guilt. But she had promised herself something during those months of quiet, honesty without cruelty. "Sometimes," she said gently. "But not because you didn't love me. Because I didn't always show you where my limits were." He swallowed. "We thought you were just strong." "I am strong," she smiled. "But strength doesn't mean endless." He looked down. "I'm sorry if we took advantage." "You didn't," she replied firmly. "You grew up. That's what children do. I just forgot to grow in a different direction." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not disappearing." She blinked back unexpected tears. "I didn't," she whispered. "I just stepped back." There is a difference between leaving and loosening your grip. The family began creating smaller group chats for specific topics: travel plans, shared expenses, surprise parties. The main thread, once overloaded with everything, became lighter. And in that lightness, she found joy again. She started sharing pieces of herself that had nothing to do with managing others. A photo of the book she was reading, a snapshot of a flower blooming in the garden. A memory from her childhood that had nothing to do with parenting. Her children responded with curiosity, not dependency. "Tell us more about when you were young." Her granddaughter once typed with her mother's help. She realized then how much of her identity had been filtered through motherhood alone. How rarely she had spoken about her own dreams, her own fears, her own history beyond the role of caretaker. Silence had not erased her voice. It had reshaped it on a quiet afternoon nearly a year after she first stopped replying. She scrolled back to that Tuesday morning. The sunrise photo. The meme. The simple good morning. She remembered standing in the kitchen with soapy hands. Remembered the weight she couldn't name. She wished she could tell that version of herself something. Not that she needed to withdraw completely. Not that she should have confronted anyone dramatically. Just this. You are allowed to exist without performing love every minute. That realization alone felt revolutionary. At the next family gathering, her younger daughter raised a toast. To Mom, she said. Lifting her glass, everyone turned toward her. For teaching us how to grow up twice. Her mother frowned playfully. Twice? Yes, her daughter smiled. Once, when we were children. And once, when you stopped fixing everything for us. There was laughter. But also understanding. Her husband added quietly. And for reminding us that silence isn't absence. She felt warmth spread through her chest the day she stopped. Answering the family group chat had once felt like a quiet rebellion. No one would notice. It had become something else entirely. A boundary, a mirror, a gentle shift in gravity. Families often believe that love is proven through constant contact, through immediate replies, through endless availability. But sometimes love deepens in the pauses. Sometimes the most powerful message is the one that isn't sent immediately. And sometimes, when a mother stops answering, it's not because she doesn't care, it's because she finally cares about herself too. On a calm morning, long after the experiment had ended and the new balance had settled, her phone buzzed again. Good morning. My world, her youngest son had typed before anyone else. She stared at the screen. Surprised. Underneath, her daughter added, May today be kind to you. The words she had written for years had come back to her, not as an obligation, but as a gift. She didn't rush to respond. She let the message sit, warm and steady. Then she typed, It already is. And for the first time in a long while, the group chat felt like a circle instead of a stage. Not centered around her. Not dependent on her. But connected. The day she stopped answering the family group chat was the day her family learned to answer each other. And the day she realized that love, when shared evenly, feels lighter in everyone's hands.